This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Another wonderful holiday edition of The Baseline with my man Warren Shaw joining me, my brother from another mother, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC. Fortunately, they didn't have to roll me out to the microphone in order for us to do this episode. But there was still much to be merry about, and I'm sure everybody who's been listening to us as well too has had much to be merry about as well too. This past Thanksgiving holiday, being able to eat, drink, be well, watch some great basketball. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure it was a very, very good weekend. Was it not, sir?
It absolutely was, spending that time with your loved ones and eating all good foods, no matter how you decide to celebrate. We don't always do a traditional Thanksgiving here in my household. We did some more traditional stuff this year, but my daughter came in, she threw down. It was amazing. And one of those times where you really do look forward to the leftovers, letting those meats kind of season and soak in some of the juices, and man, it's been good eating on our side, man. But I hope everything is well with you and yours as well too, brother. But definitely here as we get past Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and now on the sprint to the Christmas holidays, brother. It's can't believe it's already December.
Yeah, I have to admit, man, it was great. I was able to spend the holiday with my mom, my aunt, and also my cousin. It was quiet, very simple Thanksgiving holiday setting, but we had a nice little spread, and it's always great at the end of it. There's more than enough food for people to take. You know what I'm saying? So, they got to take home the holiday plate so that they've got themselves the day after meal. You know what I mean? So I'm sure it was pretty quiet over in certain restaurants out there if the families were cooking it right. If not, and there was immediate reservations for people. You know what I'm saying?
It's something I don't know if you ever had the conversation, but like I'll divert our basketball conversation really quickly. So your feelings on Turkey, is it overrated, underrated, or appropriately rated? And I guess, well, answer that first, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
I find it to be overrated.
Okay.
I think it is an underappreciated meal. But I think because now we put so much emphasis on turkey being the healthier, it's like everything's turkey. There was a time where you could prepare yourself, right? Because the only time you really ever ate turkey was during Thanksgiving. Now it's like most people are like, man, I'm not cooking this whole bird. So they wind up, doing roast, roast a couple of or getting a couple of rotisserie chickens. Right. Yep. Because chickens are obviously, you can season them more. They're more flavorful. So it seems like chickens now have become the more popular poultry, or Cornish hens if you're trying to be bougie. Yeah. Right.
That's
you know what I'm saying? So there's been variations to the substitution of the turkey, because I think now the way that turkey is being utilized on an everyday basis for people, it seems to have taken, the zing out of appreciating having a turkey for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I'm a connoisseur of a turkey sandwich just like for lunch on a regular basis. But Thanksgiving turkey has not really been my thing. However, so I'd say it was kind of overrated. But where it can be underrated is, again, as always in the preparation. So if you just season it up and throw that thing in the oven, all right, that's cool, whatever. But if you're doing Cajun style, you're doing deep fried, or like my daughter did this time, honey jerk turkey that was basically slow roasted on the grill.
That is different.
Oh, you damn right is different. So that's where I say, I think again, it's always in the prep, man. So shout out to Kayla, my daughter, man.
When is she gonna be on the Food Network, bro? When is she gonna be on the Food Network? I want to see her and Bobby Flay team up and do, beat Bobby Flay holiday throwdown, because that kind of stuff is what I would be expecting to see on Food Network. I'm just
Yeah, man. Well, I'll send you some pictures, or and maybe I'll put that on on our social feeds. And we'll put a little questionnaire out
don't
there,
be sending
survey
me
out.
pictures, man. Don't be sending me pictures because then
Well, I
you
know
know what
you
I'm
want to
saying.
eat too, but I mean that food is all
Pull
gone.
up. I'll pull up to the house right now and already establish move-in quarters. You know what I'm saying? Well before we have the next Thanksgiving. All right. So
Wow, she'll be back down here for Christmas, so we'll see what she chefs up, man. But yeah, good conversation here on the whole Thanksgiving situation. NBA was off, but now it's obviously back in full swing. With Black Friday and the weekend, and some really great matchups that took place over the weekend. So I'm excited to get into this week's conversation, man. But thank you for
absolutely, man. So on this week's show, Sean and I will get into the rookie race. I mean, we haven't spent enough time to talk about this year's rookie class that have taken over the NBA quietly, very stealth-like. So we'll talk about a couple of guys that I think people really should pay attention to. We'll also get into it's that time of the year now, a couple of weeks away before the NBA, trade markup begins. Basically, it's basically at that time where free agents who signed in the offseason, they become eligible to be traded if they do get traded. So we're going to be looking at a couple of teams, on whether or not they should really, be considering some of those players that they have signed on to, or, who may have acquired in the offseason to help bolster their roster, make a championship run. And given the disappointment so far this season and where it may be trending, should they be considering, to move some of their tradable pieces, knowing now that this window is now open for them in the next few weeks. So we'll get into all of that, man. And as always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lead. The show's Twitter handle NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms, so you know where to find us. Be sure to go to www.thebaselineNBA.com to not only check us, to not only check out this episode, but also all of the episodes that we have archived in the home base. And if you see us on YouTube channel, we say what's up. You know what I'm saying? And if you see the blue and white logo, that's the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group be running these content streets. So always go to www.19mediagroup.com. Not only check us, but also the family of great content creators that are down with the 19 Media Group family. Be sure to head to that website so you can basically get a little bit of everything for your listening pleasure. All right, Shaw. So let's roll right into it, man. This has been a very interesting start to the NBA season. And I think a lot of it is, when we have those years after we have acquired or have inherited a generational talent, it's almost like we tend to just overlook the next 5 years, you know what I'm saying, of the NBA draft class, and the next 5 years of potentially great NBA players, because we're still so fixated on the upside and the phenomenon of whoever that generational player is. I mean, we had that with Victor Wembanyama. We had that with LeBron James. We had that with Kobe Bryant. We had that with Kevin Garnett. There's been a plethora of quality players in between those iterations where those generational players have come, where there's been an opening. And in that opening, they basically are kicking down doors and establishing themselves to say, hey, I want to be recognized as one of the elite players, in the game of basketball, or at least I want to put you on notice even in my rookie season. And I think we can safely say that there's been a couple of players who's definitely stood out this season in the post Wembanyama era that I think we need to take notice of, especially for the teams that they're playing for, because their upside, I think, may change the dynamic of what these teams may be wanting to do moving forward, as far as how those teams are making those roster moves to better themselves, either to already be in championship contention or to position themselves to be a potential championship contention.
For me, what's happening is that this rookie class, while it was unheralded, it's producing a lot of decent and solid role players. I don't know that we have generational talent in this class as of yet, but some unexpected, maybe by some production. A lot of that is always based on the opportunities that present themselves. And when you talk about the rookie of the year race right now, Jared McCain is obviously leading it because he's had the most opportunity, because Philadelphia has underperformed. Paul George and Joel Embiid have missed so much time. Maxi's missed time as well. And it's allowed McCain to really step into that role and lead all rookies kind of in scoring this year. But he wasn't the guy that people were picking. Zach Edey was. And Edey himself is battling his own injuries, but just hasn't fit into what is a very, very deep Memphis team for those opportunities to present themselves. A guy like Reed Shepherd is finding himself struggling to get minutes on a very deep Houston Rockets team that is now second in the Western Conference. So when it comes to the rest of these guys and these other rookies, I'm looking at a guy like Stephon Castle that I think he does have, some moxie about him. I'm not saying generational talent by any stretch of the imagination, but I really like his game, especially on the defensive side of the basketball. And I think the opportunity is going to present itself with the San Antonio, because as we'll talk about here on the next segment, there are going to be some teams who are selling. And a lot of those teams have rookie guys who are probably going to be the benefits of those sales if other veterans kind of get out of their way. You think about Washington, potentially Atlanta, and again, the San Antonio Spurs, if they were to move on from Chris Paul or Harrison Barnes, but they're in a little bit of a juxtaposition right now because they're playing a little bit over their heads and not sure what they're going to quite do, especially with Popovich, dealing with the stroke, and how's that organization really going to try to move forward. But it's a long-winded way of saying that, I'm impressed with the rookie class in terms of the role players here, but it hasn't gone in the way that I thought many people thought it was going to go, especially with McCain kind of leading the charge here and guys like Reed Shepherd and Edey kind of falling to the wayside.
So there's a couple of interesting things that you had kind of highlighted in what you just explained. In my opinion, and I don't want to misconstrue when we say generational talent, because I wasn't saying that there's anybody here that's generational. I think what I was saying is that we're just all glassy-eyed over the generational talent that is Victor Wembanyama, that we don't even recognize some of the stardom that's going to probably come out of even this class, right? Like, it usually is 3 years of getting caught up in the wind, the whirlwind of a great player, and we completely, forget who these guys are. One thing I will say, though, is a guy like, for example, Jared McCain. He comes into a situation where essentially he is supposed to be a role player. However, his offensive explosiveness and his level of aggression really speaks to something that even Philly fans, I think, are acknowledging and recognizing, as to say, I think we'll be okay if we have to absolutely move on from a guy like Joel Embiid and a guy like Paul George. If you give me two guys like Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain, these guys have a motor about them. They've got an attitude about them. They've got a level of aggressiveness about them. And sometimes when fans are struggling to see success, they want their players to identify with what they struggle most with, or what makes them who they are, what makes them tick. It's probably one of the reasons why people hate Philly fans and things of that nature, is because there's this bravado about them. When you see that exuded from a rookie player, right? Because sometimes those type of players, they either fall they crack under that pressure of having to be that kind of player, or they allow it to get above, consume them too much, and it's just more fake than it is. I think there's a genuine hustle in Jared McCain, and I think that, to me, is what bodes well, is when you see these rookies, maybe they are coming in and establishing role-like mentality, but are putting their foot down and saying we could be more than just role players for this team. And I think that, to me, is what stands out a lot with what you see from guys like Jared McCain, Stephon Castle, Dalton Connect. There is a calm before the storm like mentality about them. And when they get onto the basketball court, you're not being rashed with chaos and the rookie, frustrations that most coaches go through. It's almost as if these guys absolutely from the tip off have said, I deserve to be here, and I'm going to show you why I deserve to be here. And I think, that's tough, man. That's probably what's going to make this class stand out more than anything. Because and I know, Shaw, there was nothing impressive about what was going to happen with this year's rookie class, right? Like, no one had any expectations. As a matter of fact, that there was, rummages about this being absolutely the worst rookie class there is, with no one really making any depictions that any of these guys are going to be successful in the NBA. Now, I'm not saying that these guys are going to be all pro, all NBA. We don't know that. But I definitely see where these guys truly can make a mark. They can certainly salvage this year's draft class with just the names I just mentioned, because of what contributions they're already making, which some of these guys in other iterations, other draft classes would have needed to take probably the whole season before you begin to start talking about whatever upside and potential they may have.
Yeah, some of them have surprised me in terms of their impact, to either inject themselves into the starting lineup or in some cases just the rotational lineup where you thought they might have been buried behind maybe some more veteran guys. I look at a guy like Bob Carrington in Washington. It's like, oh, I didn't really know much about Buddy, but he's out here and he's hooping. Now, truth be told, I think the Wizards are going to be sellers, so they're now showcasing Brogdon a little bit more, I think, ahead of the deadlines or the trade
sucks
season
because
opening
Brogdon
up.
has always been one of my guys. I've loved I felt like he's been.
But I don't think he's going to be on this roster. But again, that's for the next segment. So that opens up what Bob Carrington's kind of already shown. Now opportunities now to kind of play, and then you think about. I'm sorry, Bob said Bub Carrington, but also then there's Yves Missy in New Orleans. Right, all the injuries and the fact that they didn't have a real center going into the season anyway, with Daniel Tice kind of being the de facto starting five, or Zion, I guess, if you were, if you're nasty, Yves has come in there now and he's kind of captured that role. And I don't know that when Zion and Brandon and everybody is back healthy, that he will not see significant minutes. I think he will see significant minutes because he is an energy guy, giving them some great size and, like I said, an energy and rebounding and shot blocking at the five position that they desperately need. So it's been really great to kind of see some of these guys and lesser known guys, not lesser known, but not in the top five, if you will, number 9 pick, number 16 pick, et cetera, kind of making waves here in a way that I just found to be unexpected. And the rotational play of these guys is really something to be lauded in what is, again, still a peculiar rookie year. But I don't think how it started is how it's going to finish. And that's really my point. While McCain is getting all the accolades and getting all the run right now, I think some of these other guys are going to get significant run towards the back end of the season, and not even the back end, the middle part to the back end of the season, and probably dethrone McCain unless the Sixers stay, mortally injured and Embiid and Paul George really don't play, even 50 games this year.
Jared McCain and Stephon Castle aside, who do you think has the best opportunity to establish themselves to be in the runnings for Rookie of the Year if they already aren't considered, excuse me. But more importantly, to really have a breakout, second half of the first half of the season or going into the second half of the season.
Yeah, I'm actually, this is a little bit of a cheat. I think, of Alexandre Sarr, the Wizards pick number 2. So especially if Kuzma and Brogdon and guys like that move on and Valanciunas as well, there's no more minutes for anybody else. Like, who else are they going to play out there? So I think Sarr is set up because we know Washington is looking to move 2, if not all 3 of those guys, save, Jordan Poole. And I think Sarr will just be in such a great position. And he's already averaging, 10, 6, and 2 blocks a game or something like that, too, as the number 2 pick. So he's shown some chops. I think he's going to be the guy that really steps up into the role here because the minutes are just going to kind of come cascading down upon him in a way that would be hard for him to be denied.
One person who I really like, and I hope he's able to succeed because of just, I don't know, there's something in the way that Jenkins uses Zach Edey, right? Like, I don't know how it is, but he makes it work with a person of his stature,
sure.
Offense that is more designated for, speed. Zach holds his own. He seems to work well, even with the first unit at times. Obviously his injuries is kind of, muddled, the consistency factor in it, but you can see that Jenkins isn't afraid to put him out there on the basketball court, which is, to me, that bodes well for a guy like him because I think he can bring a lot to the table if he continues to develop. But part of that development is the confidence of being able to get out there on that basketball court and run with the big dogs. And he's proven to do that, whether or not
he's not even the best rookie on his own team right now.
Yeah, right? Yeah, no, absolutely.
Wales is getting more run there too. And that's because Ja's been out and Scottie Pippen Jr., they're not trying to turn the reins over to him. So Jalen Wells coming here and produced, very well in that backcourt. But Memphis has had so many injuries, but they're so deep. That's where, I think we didn't know this going into the season that they were this deep. Guys like Jay Huff and Santi Aldama. We know about Aldama, but
and I think, what I was just going to say, Shaw, is I think that is part of the key to what I think will help the Memphis Grizzlies maybe accelerate. Look, you have them much higher up the food, in as far as the totem pole, so to speak, when we're talking about play-in situations and where they may fit in, that, if they figure things out, and obviously you got to give it time because Morant's been gone for a whole season pretty much, right? But I think part of where I can jump on board with where you're coming from is the confidence that Jenkins can utilize his players to help create those mismatches against teams that he doesn't have those matchups in his favor, even if he has a John Morant. So to your point, Wells, Bane, Morant, that's all well and good. But unless they're playing out of their minds, he's going to have to rely on that front court depth that he has lost since Tillman's been gone, since Adams is gone, right? Like, so there are elements to where the Memphis Grizzlies probably are looking for youthful uprising, so to speak, in those roles, in those positions, that, to your point, the Aldamas, the Huffs, and now the Zach Edeys can help bring out that dynamic. And you can hopefully see more creativity from Jenkins in his ability to implement and use those guys for whatever those purposes are, but to open things up more for what seems to be a very dangerous backcourt that we already know is established with the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, I just think Edey's going to be so pressed because of the competition there. Vince Williams Jr. is a wing guy. He's coming back. G.G. Jackson hasn't played yet as well, too. Laravia, when he gets minutes, he plays well. So to me, like, Edey is almost he's icing on a proverbial cake. Where I thought he was going to be more integral to what they did. I didn't realize they had cultivated like this true bench mob that would probably preclude Jenkins for the need of Edey in the same way that I think, we all thought was going to be the case. It's a good problem to have if you're Memphis. Not so great, I think, for Edey and his attempts to be the rookie of the year here. But either way, still a long, great, good career. I think he's shown good chops in the time that he's been, in the 14 games he's played thus far.
Absolutely. Shaw, I just want to quickly get your final thoughts. Number 1 draft pick, Zaccharie, Risache, right? What are we saying about him? It's kind of interesting to me because I would have figured that Quinn Snyder would probably feature him a little bit more. I understand that, the emphasis is on Trae Young and, the guys that are
Jalen Johnson is balling. So
yeah, Jalen, and exactly. But to me, I would still think that he would, figure out, again, we credit Quinn Snyder because he's a creative and innovative, kind of guy. And, he's basically working with a clean slate. But what do we say about him? Do you see there's that future for a guy like him in Atlanta under Snyder's, tutelage, so to speak, or under the Snyder era? Or do you think that he may be better suited for the way his game has been set up to probably be elsewhere, and we may not be able to see, the potential of what he may be able to bring to the table unless something dynamically changes with that roster over the next year or two?
Atlanta's a team that is confusing because you're not quite sure what they want to do with Trae Young. And, as we record, you're going to be prisoner of the moment. Atlanta's playing really well. I think they won like 4 or 5 in a row. They beat Cleveland twice, already this year. So this Hawks team, backed by Trae Young, but I think even more importantly, what Jalen Johnson has become, as a go-to guy and a secondary creator and rebounder, we just didn't expect. They still have Okongwu and Capella that they probably have to move on from. DeAndre Hunter's more or less coming off the bench. Bogdanovich's been hurt most of the year. So, when it comes to Risache, Dyson Daniels on this roster as well, too. I don't know that he's going to be a focal point of what they're going on here, too. I think right now he's third at best in line, for the proverbial crown, because Jalen Johnson has come on in a way that many people did expect, especially after what he showed last year. So Risache is going to have to kind of figure out what that looks like. Is he really a 3? Is he a 4? You know what I mean? At 6'8". I mean, I guess those positions are obviously interchangeable in today's NBA. But where is he more comfortable? He's still slider frame as well, too. I think Atlanta is going to, run the gamut with him a little while, especially I don't think they're going to be moving on from Trae Young. And so he'll have opportunities to, be the third guy there. But that will probably need to happen like really clearly defined as the third guy, probably as soon as next season. I don't know if that's going to happen this year, but next season they'll be looking for him to take some strides and some steps, but he's not the main guy there by any stretch of the imagination.
All right. Fair enough. Well, like I said, or like we are basically saying, this is a very interesting rookie class, and there's a plethora of really good name players who have established themselves early, given themselves an opportunity for us to have eyes on them throughout the course of this year. Right now, Jared McCain is clearly a runaway favorite as far as rookie of the year goes, just for what he's been able to contribute in such a quick amount of time and the run that he's actually getting. But I do see, to your point, Shaw, that there are a couple of guys, if given the same kind of run like McCain is, they probably would equally be on that same footing, in the runnings for the rookie of the year. So it'd be interesting to see how things kind of play themselves as we start getting a little bit closer towards NBA All-Star weekend timeframe, to see where these guys are, where the team's records are, where they are in the hierarchy of the teams, as far as the scoring, as far as where they are scoring for the team, whether they're 1B, 2A type situation and things of that nature. So it'll be interesting to see, man, because they are playing some pretty exciting basketball, especially when their teams are struggling. So it doesn't have to be so sore on the eyes. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we'll do a little quick rundown on teams that, are they going to be buyers or sellers? You know what I'm saying? Given the fact that right now the window for the NBA trade up scenario is available for guys that have been signed in the offseason. Now they're, eligible to get moved if they need to be moved. And we've seen over the last couple of years that some teams have taken advantage of that situation early, rather than waiting until the NBA trade deadline, which usually happens right around the weekend after NBA or the weekend before All-Star weekend takes place, right? So we want to see if there's teams that we see clearly on the radar early enough that they possibly could be buyers or sellers. But first, are you craving nonstop hoop action? NBA League Pass is your ticket to the ultimate basketball experience. Enjoy live games, on-demand replays, and exclusive behind-the-scenes content across a variety of devices. With NBA League Pass, you'll get more access to your favorite NBA content. Stay up with the NBA like The Baseline does. Sign up now and type link.nba.com/LP19MG. NBA League Pass is running a flash sale from November the 27th through December the 3rd, 2024, with the code BFCM2024LPC. That's BFCM2024LPC. This is a limited time offer, the perfect opportunity to attract fans eager to catch every thrilling moment of the NBA season. Remember the code BFCM2024LPC. More Baseline, Callie Warrenshaw. Don't go anywhere. We are back. Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And time for us to dig in a little bit, man, on teams, whether or not they're going to be buying or selling once we get to that first window of where off-season moves, guys who have been signed, free agents signed in the off-season, they become eligible to possibly get traded or to be, on the trading block, so to speak. And we've seen this, over the last couple of years, Shaw, where once we hit that deadline, which is usually December the 15th, once that deadline hits, you know what I'm saying? There have been some moves made in the season. You know what I'm saying? Players getting moved to different teams rather than waiting until the NBA trade deadline before we start speaking about where rosters have been, impacted. Obviously, there's an advantage in doing something like this. When you make a big move like this or acquiring a certain player, you want to be able to afford time and games being played rather than waiting on the back end when there's only so many games left to be played around NBA All-Star weekend. You're basically looking at a little more than, less than half of the games more than half of the games have already been played for the NBA season. So it doesn't afford time if you're making a blockbuster deal, you know what I'm saying, when you make that trade in February, where you have those extra 2 months at your disposal to find out what you can do to get these players acclimated, to get your team gelled and get them raring to go if they're in playoff position. So we clearly understand that there's an opportunity there to do that. From your perspective, though, who do we see more as the buyers of a situation like this, where it's enabling them to say, yeah, we need to find somebody quick, fast, and in a hurry in order to make sure that we're maintaining our position in whether it's the Eastern or Western Conference, respectively?
Well, as we're recording, I think a team that may need to look to buy, and I don't know what their actual resources to do so, are the Indiana Pacers. Remember, I was lower on them in our previews than most people were. And I think that chicken has kind of come home to roost a little bit. Like, Halliburton has not been amazing, while Mathurin has played extremely well. there's just something missing, I think, with the juju that they had from last year. And I think this might be a team that might be looking to buy here now, but I don't know in what capacity they would do that, because they just got Siakam last year. Miles Turner is still there. Obviously, again, you're not moving on from Halliburton, and Matherman is finally back. Where is the help going to come from? And I think a lot of times we think, oh, it's going to be in the starting lineup. Maybe they may just need some bench depth or whatever, but what are their mechanisms in essence to be able to kind of go and do that? So that's a team that, I think where you're looking at like, all right, we're not quite what we thought we were going into the season. I think the Pacers are a team that would be looking to buy. You have other teams that are always in the hunt. You know what I mean? And like the Lakers are always, sniffing around things, or the case would be. The Warriors were much rumored to be in trying to make a big swing for either Paul George or Markkanen in the offseason. They don't have, I think, the ability to do something quite that big, but they'll still be in there. But when you talk about a team that I think needs to do something, I think that an Indiana Pacers team stand out to me as somebody who needs to become a buyer.
Yeah, so I like where you were going with the Indiana Pacers. I think part of me is it's more the psychological thing, because I don't know, when I look at this team last year, nothing really changed, right? They didn't lose any significant pieces or players. So a lot of it should be, you got this far, right? And you tasted the opportunity to possibly go to an NBA Finals. And I'm looking at this team, Sean, I just don't see the hunger. So it's interesting, because maybe to your point, you do something to shake things up in fear of, or in understanding of, that this may not actually be the kind of roster that's going to be able to compete with the big dogs. And I think part of that is because look at how improved those teams are, right? You look at the way things are established in that Central Division, and how teams are marketably mentally in a better space with what they're doing, that things don't hit them and adversity doesn't hit them as hard. And you say to yourself, maybe these guys just need more time to snap out of it. But then you run the risk of the season can get away too quickly. And if you had an opportunity to make a play or make a move to significantly bolster the roster, to change things up, to shake things up, would you have not done that? So it's an interesting, dilemma. When you got a team like the Golden State Warriors, look, I think you've mentioned it, y'all. Like a week ago, you were just like, hey, I'm ready to abandon ship on these guys, because even though the roster looks, like right now they look successful, the thing is, they are going to get had by a team that knows how to play them. They're going to get had by a team that's going to be more physical than them. They're going to be had by a team that's going to be longer than them, that's more girth in the front court and things of that nature, that can body up Steph Curry, swarm him, stay on him, and basically put the onus on the rest of that roster. And while they've all literally been playing outside of their heads and stuff like that, they may actually, or would eventually, come down to earth. So if you are Dunleavy and Kerr, do you rest on your laurels thinking that through the season, these guys are going to figure out how to deal with those adversities and roll with the guys that you have, because it is a pretty deep lineup? Or do you trade some of those chips in, knowing that you have the greatness of Green, and you have the greatness of Curry, and you got quality players like Hield and a couple of those guys, you can afford to lose a couple pieces in order to do that? It's an interesting dichotomy, right? Because that's part of the reason why when you open up this window, you want to see which of these executives are thinking like how we're talking about, and are saying to themselves, yeah, we need to do something, because we don't want to squander the opportunity for maybe a possible championship window if we can get a quality guy with only giving up a few quality pieces off of our roster.
Right. So if you go to the Warriors, right, who they're going to want something significant, because they're clearly high on Kuminga and Podziemski and guys like that. So what player moves the needle for them? Paul George and Larry Markkanen did. All right, well, who's the next player that's close to that might be available, that could be on one of these selling teams? And the guy I keep coming back to, while I know there's a lot of besmirching of his name over the last years, is Zach LaVine. In terms of the excitability, the offensive, prowess, that's the only guy that I really think could come in there and change what they're doing fundamentally offensively. And he'd have to buy in defensively, because the Warriors are playing defense again. But that's the only name out there, because Brandon Ingram is the next biggest name. And we can talk about the fact that he just signed with Clutch in preparation of potentially getting dealt before the trade deadline here. But I don't think Ingram does a lot for them if it has to cost them Kuminga, Wiggins, and Podziemski, or two of those three. Like, I just don't see them wanting to do that. They'd rather just kind of stand pat. So to me, it's like, all right, who comes in here and changes the game right now? And that's the only name that I can really think about. mean, you can maybe, and I'm squinting to see it. But if you're looking over at Brooklyn, can you convince Brooklyn to get off of Cam Thomas? I think they're more willing to get off of Cam Johnson than Cam Thomas. But
Yeah,
if you're looking for
we're still
offensive
talking about the
firepower,
Warriors.
yeah,
We're still talking about Warriors.
yeah.
Let me ask you, what about Vucevic? Do you think Vucevic is literally untouchable?
No, he's there. He's clearly on the move, or clearly being dangled out there in trade rumors. So, could Golden State swing that? I just don't think he's a Kerr guy. So I don't think they would be looking at Vucevic, but I think other teams are going to be looking at Vucevic.
So here, to me, Shaw, I hope you don't now when you hear what I'm saying is he's a warrior. You know what I'm saying? A warriorite. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got me already loving the Lakers and
Laker Cal is a real thing. Don't pretend.
And then schmoozing up with the Golden State Warriors, albeit though I'm fully on board with teams that are about their destinies. You know what I'm saying? Sure. See it through. Okay. I'm about rummaging under other empires if necessary. Okay. But in all fairness, though, or excuse me, all seriousness, I would like a Vucevic in Golden State. I think the Warriors need to get past this. We want, a one-dimensional type of player, simply because we feel like we're already getting everything that we need from, Steph and, from Wiggins and from Hield and stuff like that, because, they take up or consume most of the shots. It would be nice, that they get back to having, a quality front court player who can consistently score the basketball down low and take the pressure off of. So if you don't want Draymond Green shooting threes, not that I don't, want him to, but clearly that's not his thing. He's never made it a priority. He doesn't, only knowing he has to, you know what I'm saying? But he would love to get the ball down to somebody who's going to go down there and score the basketball consistently and be able to stretch the floor and shoot the three consistently. They want their version of a David Lee again. You know what I mean? I could see that, they're getting to that point. So that's the reason why it's interesting that you mentioned Zach LaVine first, because it's not that I don't disagree with you on that, but I equally think that they probably would be more suited to have a Vucevic on their roster before maybe a Zach LaVine.
They can maybe make that happen, and the asking price is not apparently that steep right now, because Vucevic's name is also not really all that sexy for whatever reason. They a lot of people see him as an empty calories type guy. So does that cost you Trace Jackson Davis and 2 second-round picks, or you got to put some money into that as well too. So the contract of DeAnthony Melton now, I don't know, because he's out for the year. I don't know what the construction of that deal would look like that would be palatable to Chicago, but I just know the Bulls would not be excited to give up Kuminga, Podziemski, or Moody, to get Vucevic. I feel like they want to hold all of those chips and feel like, all right, we'll give you something else and some second rounders there
that
too.
Is a fireable offense if they give up that much.
Well, they won't. They absolutely won't. But I'm saying I don't think they'd even give up one of those guys, to get Vucevic. That's how low the bar is on Vuce right now for whatever reason. Again, there's a lot of people who just don't like him. I think he's more than fine, and it could be really, really a positive influence on that Warriors team, because he still rebounds, so he'll keep them, in the top 5 rebounding. I think they're second rebounder right now, and he can space the floor and shoot the three. It obviously fits into their system, so it's not a bad idea. It'll be interesting to see if Mike Dunleavy and the Warriors, kind of dive in and go in that lane.
All right, so we've talked about buyers. Let's talk about our sellers, right? Who are we expecting to take full advantage of the Christmas gift that has been bestowed upon them, which is this December 15th deadline? Like, this couldn't come soon enough for them. You know what I'm saying? Unwrap the gift. Here you go. I give my player to thee. You know what I'm saying? So who are we talking?
Well, before we do that, I want to just touch on one. I think one team that but really should consider buying, and that's the Houston Rockets. This team is performing well above expectations, even well above mine, and certainly well above yours. This team, I think, is ripe for a consolidation trade. And I know they're sniffing around, Jimmy Butler conversations. They got shut down immediately, but they sniffed around Kevin Durant, going into the regular season as well. I think they are prime and are showing, that they could be. And I don't know if one of the selling teams that I'm going to mention here makes sense for them with what they would have to sell. But same thing. We've just talked about the Bulls, so we know LaVine is up for trade. We know Vucevic is up for trade. Kobe White could potentially get into that conversation, not quite sure, what they want to do with that. I think Patrick Williams would become trade eligible on December 15th, I believe, or it might be January 15th. So I think the Bulls are our team that's looking to move. The Wizards, we know they're looking to do stuff. We already talked about in the first segment, Brogdon, Valanciunas, Kuzma, all guys who could potentially be moved on some point as well too. And then the Utah Jazz, anybody not named Markkanen right now is because Markkanen can't be moved this season. But Sexton, John Collins, Walker Kessler, all those guys could potentially be moved.
So let me put it like this, Shaw. I can definitely see Brogdon being a person who the Houston Rockets should seriously consider. I think they could certainly use a bolstering in their, their backcourt situation, their backup backcourt situation. And I think a guy like Brogdon comes in, he's familiar with Udoka, familiar with the system. You know what I'm saying? I think that there's opportunity there if we're saying that the Houston Rockets should, to your point, be, if they're buyers, there should be buyers. That's one way that they could certainly, and they don't have to give up the farm to do it, but it certainly will put them in a better position for them to have a much deeper bench, which I think is what part of that is what you're speaking of. Because right now the bench it's fairly productive, but it's certainly not to the level for them to sustain what they're trying to do and to be able to keep up with the top dogs in that Western Conference, so to speak, even though they're up there already, for them to be able to sustain what they're currently doing right now.
I agree. And, Brogdon, a veteran presence, behind Van Vliet. I know they want that to be Reed Shepherd right now. And he is getting burned, although maybe not quite as many minutes as most people would have hoped, getting only 12 minutes a night right now. Brogdon would give them another steadying force there too. I think if I suspect they were going to do anything, this might be sacrilege, but they might move off of Dylan Brooks. And try to get more explosiveness, kind of on that wing position. Right now, I mean, they have Cam Whitmore, who they could potentially dangle out there, in a trade. They love Amen Thompson. They love Torrey Eason. So I don't think any of those guys are going, but a Brooks and Whitmore type of situation could make some sense. Maybe throw in the veteran presence of Jeff Green, to try to go out there and get some more explosiveness on the wing. Because right now, Udoka hasn't playing defense. They're first in rebounding. The Brogdon thing makes some sense because they're not a great passing team right now, too. But they are what 26 in 3-point percentage, so they can utilize some help offensively. And there's a lot of things and a lot of ways that the Houston Rocket teams could go. But as we're recording, they just beat the Oklahoma City Thunder, so they are really, really in a positive way right now. That I think this Rockets team is they may want to just kind of stand pat. But again, the Wizards, the Bulls, the Nets to a lesser degree too, and the Jazz, I think are going to be the selling teams this year. And I think anybody looking to go from the play-in line, at least to try to get to above 6, could be looking at those 4 teams as, hey, maybe we can get some help from those guys.
I will say this though, Shaw. If there's one team who I agree with you should probably be on the sell, but I really think, cautiously saying that they won't, are the Brooklyn Nets. They're just one of those teams, man, that they're playing hard for Jordy. I think Jordy likes the guys that he's running with. I think if you really want to prove and have confidence in your head coach, you don't conflate him in all of this nonsense that you're doing because you don't have a clear direction about what you're trying to do with the roster. Now, from a business perspective, I think it would make sense. But what I'm just saying is that at times it doesn't help simply because you have what's enticing to sell, have players that you do want to move off and you want to sell. And then you start doing that after you have a head coach who's coming in his first year and has managed to get these guys to be competitive. Now, I'm saying that their record is reflective of them being a successful basketball team, but they are a competitive basketball team. And I think that says something as far as, are you getting a guy who knows how to coach, or do you got to put a roster around him to be a coach?
Well, this is reminding me, it's early, so it might be blasphemous to say it for some, but it's reminding me of Will Hardy in Utah, 2 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Like Utah was looking to bottom out, didn't know Markkanen was going to come in there and be a friggin' stud, and turn into an all-star level guy. And then Hardy knows how to friggin' coach and had them playing well above their heads, especially, in the first part of the season. Remember, we were talking about the Jazz where I think, 1 or 2, at this point of their season, that first year Hardy was there. That's not what's happening with Jordy Fernandez here in Brooklyn. And I think he walked into this situation knowing that this was a rebuilding job. So despite himself, despite all the injuries that Brooklyn has had, guys being in that lineup, he's made it work with whoever's there. So while I would challenge the notion of what you're saying is like, well, he seems to be able to work with whatever's there. So if you trade some of those guys away, he still seems to be a good coach and still finding ways to win. So does that mean you need Dorian Finney-Smith? Does that mean you need Cameron Johnson? If those guys can get you multiple future picks, I don't know if they're going to get first round picks back for those guys, but there's no need for all of them when you have Clowney and Waterford and, you know, even a guy, what's his name, Jalen Wilson. He's kind of come out of nowhere as well too and is playing good basketball. Like they have good pieces. So they very much can move on from some of these guys. I think Jordy would still be just fine because he is a good coach and he just makes it work.
Well, I appreciate your confidence in him because I don't disagree with you whatsoever. Maybe what I'm speaking to speaks more to the haphazards of what the Brooklyn Nets organization does and how at times it can compromise or undermine what you are trying to do, even with a quality head coach. Sometimes you do too damn much, right? Much less the same thing we're talking about with Jenkins, right? I mean, minus the situation of Ja Morant, it didn't help that, you know, that they could not manage to keep some of the core players that they had when the Grizzlies went on their initial successful run. And so now you got him basically, you know, tinkering and tweeting around. It's basically taking 2 years removed before you're actually seeing some of the potential of his influence coaching these younger guys up because he actually has guys that he can work with. So that's all that I'm saying is that sometimes the organizations do themselves a disservice when they do things like this, especially when it's a first-year head coach like Jordy, because I agree with you. I think Jordy is more than capable, and you can see that in the way that these guys are going out and playing. But you do this too much, and then all of a sudden you actually run your coach to the ground where he doesn't have the consistency of what he's been instilling on these guys to do through the course of an 82-game season. He's got to continue to keep, you know, mixing and matching in situations where they're not a successful basketball team completely because of it. You know, you just get those shot in the dark moments. You know what I mean?
Like, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for Brooklyn to bottom out here and then get a top 2 or 3 draft pick, despite Fernandez's ability to coach this roster. And I think that's when you have to kind of look at the bigger picture. Like, you have a good coach, but you still have only so much talent. So he can coach them up to be a team 2, 3, 4 games under 500, so better than expected, but that doesn't get you anything in the long term. So he'd be better served like, all right, well, whatever. Let me go ahead and see if I can get a top guy here who could potentially be franchise changing or inducing. And I think that's where Brooklyn ultimately needs to and probably will go before the season is out. Before we close, I want to kind of throw this to you as well too. You know, we have on the list here a couple of wildcard teams that we're not quite sure what they want to do right now. And to me, nobody screams out more than Miami. A lot of that is because of the Jimmy Butler situation. So you have conversations where Jimmy Butler could be going out or Miami could be looking to add to what they're doing. I talked about the San Antonio Spurs already as well too, playing a little bit above their heads. But Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes could be nice veteran guys to be added to different situations. The Pelicans are not nearly who they thought they were going to be. So not sure, other than the Brandon Ingram situation, what they're ultimately going to do. I'm going to kind of throw them to the side because they're kind of a very special situation. And then the Portland Trailblazers, another team that's playing a little bit better than expected, but they have guys here now. DeAndre Ayton, I would have said, would have been safe, and Robert Williams would have been the first guy to go. Donovan Clingan has come into this situation, and I don't know if that means DeAndre Ayton should be looking to pack his bags now, because not that Clingan is skilled as offensively as Ayton is, but clearly a rebounder and shot blocker. He knows how to play that role, and then Robert Williams as well too. Like, you can get away with those two combinations, especially if Ayton can fetch you back a first-round pick from somebody who might be desperate. I'm not sure what Portland is doing, and I'm sure they will send Jeremy Grant on the first thing smoking if somebody's willing to take that contract on. So I think they're going to be sellers. I just don't know how successful they'll ultimately be.
Look, man, we talk about these teams so much that they keep holding on. Who's that? Man, I can't think of that group from back in the day, our generation. They keep holding. Is it Simply Red?
Simply Red. I keep holding on. I know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these teams, man, they holding on to something. They hold on too long, and then they can't do anything with it worth a damn, right? But to your point, Shaw, I think the most interesting team of the ones that you named, I think, are the Portland Trailblazers, because again, this is a time where I don't know what you're going to do with Chauncey Billups, as the head coach, but a guy like Donovan, to me, is more, he's more Portland than the Time Lord and DeAndre Ayton. You know what I mean? Like, I say that because he got drafted and it's specifically he's coming in and he's already, making headway. He's doing equally as much as, when given the opportunity, as what the Portland Trailblazers inherited, bringing in DeAndre Ayton and bringing in the Time Lord. So, I find it interesting because I think at that point, once the moment you start seeing your draft class coming in and being productive, hey man, you can't pack homies bags soon enough to be like, yo man, I know you can find greener pastures elsewhere. Let me help you. Let me get you your Amtrak tickets. You know what I'm saying? And get you going. I'm gonna find you somewhere where you can live your best life, right? You know what I'm saying? But they don't want to do that, man. They just they don't want to.
It's tough though. And then you talking about that front court situation. They still want to see if Shaedon Sharpe can actually stay healthy, what he can do, with plus minutes. Does that Anthony Simons isn't old, but they kind of know what he is. So are those two kind of duplicitous where you don't need both of them? You still have Scoot Henderson, who you're trying to develop as well. And to me, they said like they're not a good team, but they're not quite as bad as I thought they might have been, like 3 wins at this stage. They have 8 wins at this stage.
I do think it's real quick, Shaw. I do think it's troubling where we are now with Scoot Henderson. There has been so much hype about this kid, when he came out of the developmental league, and then knowing that he was being drafted by the Portland Trailblazers. And I think even to some degree, they were like, oh, this is great because Billups is going to be able to really mentor this kid, talk him up. And we're just, it's never materialized. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of troubling. And I think if you're the Portland Trailblazers, you have to sit back and you have to reassess this. Right now, I still think that a lot of people believe that Scoot Henderson can be a good player, but it's far from the ideas and the expectations that he's going to be a perennial, all-star kind of player. There was more talk about Scoot Henderson being a bigger name in the league than Cade Cunningham. And look at what Cade Cunningham is doing with the Detroit Pistons right now. So I just find it to be very interesting what's going on out there. And I think people need to pay attention to this because even though this trade deadline, to your point, Shaw, is more about some of the known players, quality players, I think if a guy like Scoot Henderson gets moved, it's clearly because things are just not working out. And there's more confidence that Billups will still be there.
Henderson would get moved?
I'm just saying the likelihood.
There's no way.
No, he's not. No, I'm not. But what I'm saying, Shaw, is that when you have a situation like Billups as your head coach and you're not able to get the kind of productivity from a guy like Scoot Henderson, it's speaking more to what the organization is going to pivot and want to do moving forward. Like if you saw that Scoot Henderson did get moved and Billups has not been let go or he's no longer the head coach, then that tells you things did not work out. You know what I'm saying? The way that they were supposed to.
No, clearly. I think what's more likely to happen is that Simons gets moved so that they makes room for Scoot to be able to play plus minutes at that point guard, probably alongside Shaedon Sharpe. And then, okay, that's your backcourt of the now and the proverbial future. You give it some legs in this to kind of see if it can walk and slash run at some point. But I think again they're ripe for guys who could potentially be on the move. With that from their front court guys to some guys in the wing and guard spots as well. The Blazers are, I think, a team to watch because they're doing a little bit better than I think they expected to. And credit Billups, but also credit the guys that they have too. Because even when they got Avdia from Washington, I was like, well, that's a peculiar move for a team that's not really supposed to. You don't really know what they're trying to do. That's a piece that you feel okay, that's a good rotational piece. But why would they make that move? So what Portland is actually thinking, it still remains to be seen. But I think they're going to be very active when it comes to trade conversations here, especially leads up to December 15th and obviously into February.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, this has been another great episode, great conversations being had, especially, the way that we're focusing on what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks with the NBA trade deadline situation taking place on the 15th and where teams might be. There could possibly be some early moves being that are happening or some, rummages, around the water cooler, so to speak, about possible players being moved, within the next coming weeks once that deadline hits, right? So it'll be very interesting to see. And then obviously we have to look into that and, kind of break it down, right? Like what is the end game, in the move being made and who's going to benefit from it more importantly. So great stuff all around, brother.
Yeah, great stuff for sure. And I want our friends and listeners to tap in with us. Hope you had a happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, and all that. But let us know you wish players you think are going to be the first to move.
Well, they haven't
Teams
had
to
any
make
honey
moves.
jerk chicken. I'm sorry, if they hadn't had any honey
Jerk
jerk
turkey.
turkey. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. And I can't imagine them
You're not
having
eating like that over here, like we doing. But
that's they had everybody else has had Thanksgiving light. they didn't have Thanksgiving. They had Thanksgiving light. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I can't front. I was very happy this year for sure.
Watch.
So.
You know what I'm saying? Now you're gonna have your daughter's Instagram go blow up, man, because they heard a rumor through a show.
Like, hey, Culinary K, that's what it is.
She's taking orders for 2020 for 2025.
Yeah, that's right. 2025 orders, get them ready. And we need all those dollars coming into the Shaw family. But as always, man, it's been a pleasure. Want more fans and listeners, let us know who they think is going to get moved first. I'm going to go with the player. I think BI is a goner. So that clearly means I think New Orleans will probably make one of the first moves here too. But I think Washington is probably as sure a bet as a team to make a move as anybody else as well. Too.
Oh, they're already penciled in, bro. They're already penciled in. Once again, man, we'd like to thank everybody for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw. We appreciate you guys. You know we do. And we'll catch up with you next time.